You know what, February? You were going strong. You were doing really great. All the major theatrical releases that I saw in theaters, I really liked. I mean, sure, there were some mediocre ones, but nothing horrible. And I did skip How to Be Single and The Choice, which probably would have been absolutely awful. But then on the last week of February, Gods of Egypt comes out. You were almost there, February. I almost liked all the movies I went to see in theaters. This might be shocking to some of you, but this director that made Gods of Egypt, know what other movies he's directed? The Crow, Dark City, he even did I, Robot and Knowing. And while I haven't seen Dark City, the movies I have seen of that list, I feel he's gotten progressively worse. Yeah, this is worse than Knowing, which Knowing I thought was an okay movie. So Gods of Egypt is what you might think. It revolves around the Egyptian mythology. We have one god who is the king of Egypt, all of Egypt. And the rightful heir to the throne will be Horus, played by, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, because I know I'd fail, but Jaime Lannister, yeah. Let's just go with that. He's the Kingslayer. We all know him as such. At least as long as you've watched Game of Thrones. But anyway, Horus is meant for the throne. Well, unfortunately, his evil uncle and the brother of his father, brother of his father, who is Set, played by Gerard Butler, comes in, kills the king, takes out Horus's eyes.
You're not fit to be king. It's my turn now.
And becomes ruler of all Egypt. He's enslaved mankind. And he's even gone so far as to change the rules of death, so when you're about to go to the afterlife, in order to pass on to the afterlife, you're going to need a mass ton of riches. Don't have enough riches? You're completely disintegrated. That seems fair. Well, a young thief played by Brandon Thwaites, who you might remember from The Giver and The Signal, maybe Son of a Gun. Hopefully you know him from one of those. Oh, he was in Oculus. He was one of the guys in Oculus. Well, main character. But yeah, this thief and his lover, they have a plan to make things right. By stealing back the eyes of Horus, giving it back to Horus, and then helping him on his journey to overthrow his uncle. And so from then on out, it's a fantasy adventure. Now look, on paper, if you think about the structure, if you think about the overall story, and it's a fantasy adventure, it could have worked. Yes, it does follow a lot of the same plot lines and a lot of the same cliches of most fantasy adventure movies, but that's something I definitely don't mind because fantasy is one of my favorite genres of the movie industry. And so I'm a little bit more forgiving about the cliches and the tropes of fantasy. However, there's a lot of issues with this movie. But before I get to the issues, let's go with the good at least, right? Because there's got to be some good in this movie. Well, for one, I didn't mind the acting all that much. I thought the Kingslayer was actually really good. Same with Gerard Butler. Everyone else's acting, however, was sometimes borderline comical. Actually, more than borderline comical. Surprisingly, the two people I didn't really care about at all in this movie were the two people we were supposed to care about. And that is the thief and his girlfriend. I thought Brandon Thwaites did a really good job at the other movies I mentioned he was in, but in this movie, he was sort of bland. He wasn't charismatic enough to actually be a main character or be the thief type of character he was trying to be played out to be. We also don't get a lot of time between him and his girlfriend, and so there's not enough chemistry, not enough for us to care. So by the time that something happens, yeah, it's like, okay, so? Okay, that's awkward. Other good things, sometimes the action sequences weren't half bad. And I have to admit this, there are some moments, and it might sound absolutely crazy to say this, but there are some moments where the CGI actually looks good. I think they spent all the money on the frickin' giant snakes because yeah, they're the best looking things in that entire movie. And so the scene they're in, it was actually handled nice. I actually like that scene. That whole scene I actually did enjoy. Well, not the whole scene. The fire effects were pretty atrocious. And after watching the movie, it did make me want to go and look up Egypt mythology just to see if it got its facts straight. And you know what? There is a story about Horus and Set. Set did kill Horus's father, overthrew him, took the throne of Egypt. Yeah, the gods were actually kings of Egypt, apparently. And there is a story about Horus killing Set and taking the throne. And of course, this movie does things a little differently, but at least the premise is similar. And you know what else could be kind of considered good? Sometimes a movie is so bad that it is a blast to see because it's so freaking hilarious. It's abysmally hilarious. That's really all I got for the goods, guys. Now it's time for the bads. There's definitely some inconsistencies with Egyptian mythology. I'm guessing it's because so they don't have to do extra people and can combine some gods into one. Like Ra, for instance. Ra is not the father of Gerard Butler's character and the king. Sometimes the dialogue is really awful. Also, the movie made it very clear what kind of movie it was going to be when I realized, hey, there seems to be a scene missing here. Like, no one wants to elaborate on that? Towards the beginning of the film, we get this narration scene, and it's like, okay, we get what kind of world we're set in. Alright, we're hooked, we're ready to go. Then we're introduced to our main character, who is the narrator of this film, who is the thief, just younger now, of course. And so it introduces him as a thief by doing a little bit of an Aladdin routine where he goes to a shopkeeper, well, he's in the marketplace, and he sees this dress, he steals it, starts running off. The merchant sees him, yells, "Thief, thief!" Other people come out, start chasing him. Next thing we know, it cuts to the back of his feet, looking under as he darts into a crowd. And I'm like, okay, good, there's going to be a chase scene. It cuts, and he's already at his girlfriend's house, giving her the dress. Yeah, it builds up to a chase scene. You're about to get it, and then it cuts. You're inside a house with the girlfriend. He just casually walks into the door with the dress as if nothing had happened. What happened? Did they just cut out an exciting chase scene? Did they realize, hey, we can't do green screen with this chase scene. We're going to actually have to have a set for it. And they're like, well, we can't do that. So they just cut it out completely? I don't know what happened. There are several moments throughout this movie where, you know, this is sort of a journey, an adventure story. They're going to different places, different exotic locations that almost don't feel like Egypt. Like, the environments they go to are so far apart from each other and so different, they feel like they're in a different country. Like, there are huge, drastic changes to the environment in these different places they go to. And so you would imagine it's a long journey, but what happens is they would set up, oh, we need to go to this place, and then boom, next scene, they're at that place. Oh, you know the scene I told you earlier that seemed to be missing about him getting chased and stuff? You know what benefits that chase scene could have had? One, show us how good the thief is at being a thief and running. It would show us, okay, he's actually pretty skilled. Two, it could have given us more than just a green screen effect sort of scene, because I'd expect they would actually have to build a set for a chase scene unless they... It would look really weird on green screen, though. Would they do that? And three, give him a challenge. Show him how much it takes for him to get this dress to his girlfriend, just so we know, okay, he must really love her if he's going to go through hell to get this dress. Those are just some of the things that could be benefited from one simple chase scene. And they throw that out the window. And so the movie just expects us to believe, oh, they have chemistry, oh, they love each other because the film tells us they love each other, rather than show us that they love each other. And so I never really felt for the two characters and the two characters' relationships. until towards the end of the movie. And that's like, we kind of want to know that now because something important happens within the first act of the film. Someone dies. Oh, I forgot to mention something else that I liked about this film. Anubis wasn't the villain. For once, Anubis wasn't a villain in this movie. He was just sort of the person leading the dead to their judgment. That's pretty much all he did. And he helped protect the afterlife when there was an attack. So he was kind of a good guy. Or, I guess, more neutral, but hey, he wasn't a bad guy. That was kind of nice. Because usually the underworld gods tend to be the evil villains in these sort of movies. I mean, just look at the Clash of the Titans or any Greek mythology. Hades is like the bad guy. And if he's not the main bad guy, he's a bad guy in it still. Now, granted, Set did have a lot of the same motivations that Hades does in Greek mythology lore. And that is, my brother's the favored one. I hate my brother. I'm jealous. I got exiled. I'm in a desert. I'm gonna take out my revenge on my brother, kill him, and take what he has. Now, the most glaring, obvious thing about this movie on why it's bad is the CGI. And like I said, I admit, there are moments in this movie where the CGI actually looks beautiful, actually looks good, and sometimes decent. But at that same time, in the same movie, sometimes in the same scene, other CGI effects are abysmally horrible. Just horrendous. Like, late 90s bad. This is 2016. You'd think we'd get better. Actually, many movies have proven that we've gotten better in CGI, but not this movie. So many green screen effects in this movie are horrendous. Like, you can almost see the halo around the character as they're moving around and if you look closely enough. There's a moment where Set is attacking some rebel gods and he has this army with him and the army is fighting below and the army is just so cartoony. It almost looked like something out of a Lord of the Rings Two Towers or something, you know? Not to say that Two Towers was bad, it's just that was good for its time. That's not something you want in a 2016 movie. But as he's flying overhead, I can't remember what he was flying on because he wasn't in his armored suit, which I'll go back into that later. He wasn't in beast mode, but he was flying on something and I can't remember what. I don't really care all that much. But as he's flying, you can see he's at a green screen and you just see the halo around him if you look closely enough, and it's just... Oh, and then the gods are really, really tall compared to humans, like twice or... Is it twice the size or maybe a little bit more? But sometimes the scale looks like it differs a few times throughout the movie. However, it's really wonky when you first see it. It took a lot for my brain to adjust because it just looks so far-fetched and so weird. But as the movie progressed, I got used to it, and because sometimes it actually looked decent.
Something Set took from you. We need you.
Other times it looked like... Oh, and there's quite a few moments when heroes and people in general do really dumb stuff. Like, if you remember the scene in the trailer with the thief kissing his girl as he's holding something up and it's shining and everyone's covering their eyes, that's one of the dumb moments in this movie. Because in this scene, they're surrounded by these guards that are either going to capture or kill them. I can't remember the exact consequences, but they're going to capture them. And so he pulls out the Eye of Horus in order to blind them so that they can escape. But as he pulls it out, instead of grabbing his girl and running as they're all blinded, he decides, no, this is the best opportunity to kiss my girl as everyone's blinded. And then once they can see again, then we'll run. What kind of thief are you? Yeah, this guy's supposed to be street smart. Who's gonna do that? There are quite a few moments like that in this movie. The worst CGI effects in this movie, obviously the water and the fire. And unfortunately with Jeffrey Rush. With Jeffrey Rush's character, with Ra, because he's the god of the sun, there's a lot of fire around him. Whenever he uses his powers, he's engulfed in flames and he grows bigger than the other gods. Did you see that scene? Did you see that? See that fire? Look at it again. That's only some of the bad effects in this movie. The whole thing with Ra almost reminded me of Jupiter Ascending, because they were in outer space, and that just reminded me of another dumb thing in this movie. There's this point where Horus has to get help from Ra, but he's not going to let the human out of his sight, and so he brings the human up there with him to Ra's ship, where he does battle with this evil worm every night. And so they make a point in this movie where, hey, you're going to have to stay in the shadow of a god in order to keep alive mortal, because mortals aren't allowed here. And he reaches out of the shadow for a moment and starts getting burned a little bit. And so I'm like, oh, is the movie implying that he's getting burned by the sun because there's no ozone layer around them? I mean, they are in outer space. Is that what the movie's implying? Because if that's the truth, then how is he breathing in outer space? If you go to the point of trying to add some realism to it by not having an ozone and him having to be in the shadow of a god so that he doesn't get burned by UV light, then why is he still breathing in outer space? Come on, people. Oh, and so when these gods go into beast mode, yeah, I'm calling it beast mode. When they transform, it's just, at first I thought, okay, it's just like a suit of armor rather than actually them physically turning into something else, because it's all gold, right? Well, within the first transformation, I realized, hey, their mouths actually move. Hey, they have something under that armor headpiece. So their heads actually do turn into beast heads, but just with golden armor over the top. And so I'm like, okay, that's not as bad then. Because I wanted them to actually have animal heads rather than just armor, because that's what we know of Egyptian mythology gods. They have animal parts. But then I noticed towards some of the end fights when they do that, their mouths don't move. So then it became inconsistent. Maybe they just no longer had the budget to move the mouths. I don't know. Or they just didn't care. They didn't care. And yes, there are shots with them in just the armor with still their human heads, but there are shots with them having the beast heads, and you can definitely tell it's just armor over it. Also, whenever something gets pulled off of a god, it seems like it becomes a magical object endowed with their specific powers. So when Horus's eyes get ripped out, they turn into like these jewels where they become these all-seeing eyes. Rip out the god of wisdom's brain, it becomes this crystal blue brain that you can put in yourself or in other gods. Yeah, these gods can take powers of other gods by ripping off body parts and putting them in their own body during beast mode. And it looks Transformer-like, and it's so weird. I think I could go on and on about all the crazy stuff in this movie, but sometimes that crazy stuff is entertaining. So this movie has some entertainment because it is so bad and awful and just crazy. There are times where it actually is legitimately good, and it does have potential because it does follow a lot of the same storylines of typical fantasy. And so I was actually almost debating on giving this movie 2 stars, because I did have enjoyment with it, but I just can't give this movie a 2. There's just something about it every so often where it just irritated me rather than made me laugh, because there's some moments in this movie that are just so bad and irritatingly bad, while other times it's entertainingly fun bad. And so I'm going to give Gods of Egypt 1.5. You know what? I have seen worse movies in this February because I've seen a few movies. I just have to film the reviews for them. So I do have a movie worse than Gods of Egypt for February. It'll be fun. So, have you seen Gods of Egypt? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If not, what is your favorite movie about some sort of ancient mythology, whether it's Greek or Egyptian, or do they have anything else? As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.